Hello and good morning, friends. Today I want to talk to you as more of a follow-up from yesterday's video, right? And what we're going to be talking about today is holding tanks, and more specifically, how do you inspect a holding system, right? So when you're buying a house, a lot of people will get a real estate inspection on the home, on the septic system, the well, propane tank, whatever. They get inspections on a lot of things, but you might be asking yourself, one, how do they inspect it? Two, is it even worth getting an inspection on a holding tank system? Let's get into it. So we already know that holding tanks are gonna kind of show up on properties that have really bad perk rates and the soil's just not very good. And basically all it is just a giant vat that's gonna make it to where you can't actually get rid of the water. Sorry about that, my phone rang. So let's get back into it. So holding tanks, they're just a giant vat that all the water holds or goes into, right? So every time you flush a toilet, run a sink, bathtub, you name it, all of that liquid plus the solids will go to the tank. The tank will hold on to all that water, and then every 3 to 6 weeks, depending on how much water you use, you have to get it pumped out. Now, generally in our area, most holding tanks will be about 3,000 gallons of total capacity. So by the time you use 3,000 gallons, you have to call a septic hauler to get them to come pump all that stuff out, take it to the municipal, go from there. That can end up costing an extra couple $100 to even almost darn near close to $1,000, depending on what your property is and how much water you're using, right? So that's an expense that most homeowners can't really deal with. So when you get a property that has one, you might be thinking, well, if it's just a giant vat, do I really need to get it inspected? And my answer is yes, and the reason why. You need to make sure that it is compliant to all laws and it's watertight. And the reason why. Maryland State, as well as a lot of the counties, will go out of their way to go after you if you have a holding tank and you're just discharging it to the surface, right? Let's just say, for sake of argument, you want to put your laundry or your utility sink going out the side of the house. You could do that, but you're not supposed to, right? That's considered sewage, and it's supposed to go to the pit or to the tanks. And if you do that, let's just say your neighbor complains, the county comes out and it's a fileable offense every single day until you rectify the issue. And rectifying the issue can be very expensive on top of the fines, right? So if you have this, you need to make sure that all of the plumbing is connected. So what do they do when they go to do an inspection, right? You might be saying, well, that's kind of goofy. How do you inspect a tank that's just literally a giant box? Well, first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna come up and you're gonna look in the tank itself, right? So generally, whenever you have the tank, you're gonna have a large green lid. Maybe it'll be black, sometimes it'll be blue, sometimes it'll be concrete, but it'll look like this, right? So the main thing that you're gonna wanna do is locate where that's at. First thing that the contractor is going to do is open it up, and they're going to see how full is the water in the tank, right? They want to see, has it been pumped recently? Is it almost time for pumping? You want to measure the total depth and then start to try and figure out the volume. So you find your access cap, you see where the water level's at, you measure it out. The next thing the contractor is going to do is they're going to go ahead and they're going to measure out the length and the width of that tank. And the reason why they want to do that is so that way they can figure out what that volume is. Is it 1,000 gallons, 2,000 gallons, 3,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons? I've had one residential home that had a 5,000 gallon setup. It's a lot of water, right? That's an entire load for a pump truck, depending on the size of the pump truck, but most pump trucks will be about that size, right? So you have to find how much volume you have. That way you can give the person a percentage, right? So if we know that we're at 30% full, we can do the math and we can say, all right, you're probably going to end up pumping this in the next 20 days or so. And that kind of gives you a little bit idea of what to expect. So we go ahead, we find the access, we measure our liquid. The next thing what we're going to want to do is we're going to one at a time go to each individual sink, toilet, and shower head, turn them on, let it run, go back outside. Do you see the water? Go back in, turn it off, move to the next one, and you keep doing this on every single piece of plumbing in the home until you can physically confirm that everything goes to the tank, all right? And if it doesn't, that's when you have to get it rerouted by a licensed contractor. Now, the next most important thing, in my opinion, is you go back to those risers, and you're gonna get a hose, and you're gonna leave that hose running right next to those risers. And the reason why is you wanna see, is that riser watertight for when it rains? Usually a good rule of thumb is you let that water run for about 10 minutes or so, and that should be enough water to saturate that area. You can go a little bit more, right? If you're concerned that it's not watertight, like let's just say that somebody put in a concrete riser. In my opinion, the concrete risers are very hard to get watertight. It's way easier to do a plastic riser as a watertight system. But if you do that, you want to make sure you run the water, right? If you run it for long enough, you should start to see either moisture in the riser ring itself, or you should see water running into the tank. If that's happening, that's a huge problem, because that means that every time it rains, additional water is going into your tank. And again, every ounce of water that's in there is money out of your pocket, right? From there, we know our size, we know how full it is, we know that it's watertight. The next most important thing besides the watertight quality is to make sure, does the alarm work, or is there an alarm? There should be an alarm inside of that tank that has the float, right? The float will go up and down. When it's up, the alarm goes off. When it's down, the alarm does not go off. The purpose of that alarm is to let you know as a homeowner, when is that tank due for pumping, right? Generally in our area, they will size it to where once that alarm goes off, you've got 2 days worth of space before you need to get it pumped out. Meaning you can go ahead and have whoever you want rather than having to pay whoever answers the phone first on an emergency basis, right? Because emergencies always cost more. Now in our area, most of the contractors, as soon as they get a high water alarm call, they're going to be there the next day because they want to make sure that you don't have sewage in there in your basement, right? So you check the alarm. I would recommend as a homeowner that you check that alarm every year. Just make sure that that thing is always working, so that way you don't have to worry about that thing ever failing and you have sewage coming back into your home. The next thing that the inspector is going to look for is they're going to be looking to see, do I see any evidence that maybe at some point somebody had a sump pump in there and they're just pumping it into the woods. I cannot tell you how many times I've come to holding tanks and you're like, there's an extension cord right next to the riser. There's a tube sitting in the grass right next to the tank. Wonder what that could be for. And then you come to find out that, yeah, they've just been pumping it into the woods. Another major safety hazard and health hazard. Don't do that, right? So with these holding tanks, this is kind of your last stop on a property, right? If your septic system fails and the perk test does not work well, holding tanks are pretty much what you're going to get. They're not super great. They do lower the value of your home, and they do actually increase the cost of your daily maintenance or monthly maintenance of your property. So if you're buying a house that has holding tanks, it's very, very important to get it inspected, because it could ultimately cost you more money if you don't get it inspected and stuff stops working, right? So I hope that this was helpful and valuable. If there's any areas of conversation that you'd like me to discuss, or maybe you have a holding tank, maybe you can tell us, leave a comment below. How many times a month are you pumping the tank? Maybe you're pumping it every 2 months. How much does it cost you in your area? What kind of lifestyle changes did you have to make in order to live on that holding tank? Leave those comments below. I'm sure we're here to help out somebody else who might be in your situation, and they could learn from your experience, my experience, and everybody else's experience. We're here as a collective to help everybody grow. Hit that like button, subscribe. Till next time, guys.